everybody. Glad y'all can make it here. Sorry for the odor in the room. I told that they were doing some work on the third floor that resulted in some unexpected outcomes, and it should be going away soon. But glad you were able to brave it and be with us today. I think there's got to be a really good joke somewhere about how the stench connects with the current political environment. I don't know exactly what that joke is, so y'all help brainstorm. Maybe by the end we can have a punchline. I am Kenneth Townsend, and among other things, I chair the Public Events Committee here at the college, which hosts these weekly gatherings. I'm really excited about today's program because it brings together two people who I really like and have gotten to know a bit over the years. And I also think that it's a particularly important time for our country to be having a conversation along these lines. Bipartisanship in a partisan era. My goodness, if we're not in a partisan era right now, I don't know what a partisan era looks like. Both Brandon Presley, who is the Public Service Commissioner for the Northern District of Mississippi and is on my far left, and Mike Tagert, who is the Transportation Commissioner for the Northern District of Mississippi, who is also an alumnus of Millsaps, have spent much of their lives working on things that don't have to be viewed as ideological sorts of matters. And they have, both in their professional lives and personal lives, advanced the common good across political difference. And that's one of the reasons why the very first two people I reached out to when this idea emerged was these two folks. So I'm glad that the top two choices said yes. We're glad to have y'all. To give you a sense of what's going to happen, I am about to hand it over to them, and they're going to tell you just a little bit about what they do. What does a Public Service Commissioner do? What does a Transportation Commissioner do? And then we're going to, after that, shift our conversation a bit more concretely to the question of how you can work with people who you might disagree with to accomplish things. And after we have some conversation amongst ourselves, we're then going to open up the floor to audience Q&A. So give some thoughtful questions you might like to ask as we move forward to that part of the program. So again, we have Mike Tagert, Brandon Presley. Glad to have both of them. They have very busy schedules, so we're honored that they're able to carve out some time to be with us today. And please join me in welcoming them to Millsaps. All right, is this working? Test, test. Can y'all hear? Okay. Mike is immediately to my left, so I guess I'm going to hand the microphone to him unless Brandon wants to go first. And then they're going to, like I said, tell us just a little bit about what they do, and then we're going to have a conversation. So Mike, are you ready to go?
Sure, absolutely. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm Mike Tagert. I am an alum of Millsaps College, a proud alum of Millsaps College. I live in the northern third of the state, and my title is Transportation Commissioner for North Mississippi. And I think Brandon and I both share the same geographic districts, even though different positions. But I've covered the northern 33 counties of our state, which represents about a third of the population in our state, almost 1 million Mississippians. And as Transportation Commissioner, which that post has been in an elected capacity since back in the 1930s. And what we do is the mission of the Transportation Commissioner is simply to represent the people of the Northern District when it comes to infrastructure and transportation related, or transportation and infrastructure related issues and matters. And it is a partisan elected type position, but as we're going to talk about today, I hope certainly the way we view it, the way I view it, and historically the way this particular position has been viewed, it is a nonpartisan issue. All of us, we work daily on infrastructure and transportation matters that are equally important to all Mississippians, whether you're just the head of a household with a family of 4, or you run a large commercial trucking operation. All the transportation related issues, first and foremost, the public safety components of that are nonpartisan. They all affect, we all care about those, I think, equally. If you're in the business and you are interested in access and being able to move your raw products into our state and our finished products out and to employ people and to make a profit, those are things that are, from a transportation standpoint, and the responsibilities of my job are independent, or should be independent of politics in many cases. So that's really my job. It's a policy position, even though I'm there on a frequent daily basis. I receive calls about needing a stop sign here or a stop sign there or a red light here, which is all fair game and very important. But the crux of the position is policy related, and it is a policy and budget, setting the budget and the priorities within our transportation budget in Mississippi. And I thank you in advance for having me today.
I'm Brandon Presley. I represent the exact same counties as Commissioner Tagert does on the Public Service Commission, which just kind of hit me. Those same 33 counties elected a Republican in transportation and a Democrat in the Public Service Commission. It may say something about our region of the state. Public Service Commission is the state's regulatory body for utilities, that'd be electricity, water, sewer, natural gas, heavily involved in trying to get our state wired up with high-speed internet service, which is a crisis in the rural areas of our state, but not just in rural Mississippi. Like Mr. Tagert, you know, I don't go into a meeting thinking about what's the partisan stance on what this is. It's about getting a job done, trying to figure out a way in which to move things along. And so our job is not only to set rates, for instance, what you pay your energy cost, we set that rate. But also I view this as not just in that vein. We expand services throughout the state. We're a consumer watchdog agency. We have the ability to conduct investigations, hold hearings, go through any process with public utilities because, as you know, they have absolutely no competition. So if, you know, what they did without regulation, then, you know, there could be a detrimental effect to the consumer. Our agency was created in 1886 as the Railroad Commission and is actually referenced in the state constitution of 1890 that says that all common carriers shall have their rates regulated by commission or otherwise. So we're mentioned within the state constitution. We're one of 17 public service commissions, public regulation commission, public utility commissions in America that are elected. So we join our 16 other states in that. We do run in a partisan election, but it has been a traditionally nonpartisan type of position. I was elected in 2008. Served majority of my period as the one Democratic member with 2 Republican members. Today, I serve as chairman. Commissioner Cecil Brown from the Central District is a Democrat. The Democrats have a 2-1. We have had 500 votes, I think, and only about 6 of them have been along party lines. So a very nonpartisan type position, looking more at what is the good of the state, and really not even getting bogged down in partisan type things. So we're a quasi-judicial agency, a regulatory body wearing many, many hats.
Great, thanks. So you've done a good job, I think, outlining how the content of your work, in some respects, lends itself towards bipartisan or nonpartisan sorts of sentiments and approaches. What sorts of recommendations might you have for people who serve in other elected offices for how they can use the types of approaches that your work and your positions have entailed to do their own jobs more effectively? I don't know if there's been a particular moment in time where you have found yourself working with someone across party lines in a really memorable way. But how is it that what you have done you think might be translatable to others? Because I think most of us in this room, and I'm assuming that on some level y'all probably agree that we are living in a pretty partisan time. And it does seem to be increasingly difficult for people, whether it's citizens or elected officials, to work together across different. So what observations or recommendations do you have?
I would, you know, so much of my job, and I think that it does extrapolate to a lot of other state agencies, various components. So much of our job, and we see it tragically on unfortunately, a frequent basis, but public safety component of infrastructure, having adequate infrastructure, just the sheer humanity that you kind of encounter when you have tragic accidents. And I dare to ask that most of us in this room probably have experienced someone, a friend or a family member who's been a part of a tragic accident. We see that on a weekly basis, unfortunately. So the public safety component is somewhat common ground, which we have worked regardless of constituencies, worked with various different trade organizations, certainly the Republican and Democratic Party Those kinds of unfortunate, tragic situations where we see accidents and fatalities all too often. In those situations, it so often reminds people of the common ground. And in transportation, especially in a rural state like Mississippi, there's a direct correlation between rural states, agrarian-based economies like Mississippi, and unfortunate and tragic accidents related to transportation, or a lack of adequate infrastructure related to transportation. So we see that, again, far too often. But it is also, you also see the unity that that provides, regardless of your constituency, your advocacy group, or certainly your political affiliation. That seems to certainly always override a lot of the situations that we see that are more partisan.
Well, I tell my national friends, as a Democrat in Mississippi, I'm an endangered species, you know, and so the nature of my responsibilities, the nature of my affiliation with the political party and the political party power in our state, you're not going to get anything done if you don't reach across the aisle. I mean, the easiest thing to do, the best default position, not the best, the easiest default position would just be to sit in the corner and scream and not get anything done. We see that, you know, in lots of things playing out nationally, but that would be the easiest default position. For instance, you know, right now we're working very hard to repeal a law that was passed in 1942 that is stopping rural electric cooperatives from bringing high-speed internet service, world-class internet service to every rural spot in the state of Mississippi. It's a law passed in 1942. Nobody dreamed the internet would be around in 1942. And we've got to get that changed if we're going to change the trajectory of rural Mississippi. I can't get that law changed with just Democratic votes. I'd be wasting my time, be talking about it if I thought I could do that without Republican support. Poll we released yesterday shows that of partisan-leaning people, when we asked them, should only cable companies and telephone companies be able to provide you internet service? Of the partisan, self-identified partisans, Republicans by 82 to 6%, off the charts, agreed with our position to change the law. Now, that's not a Republican or a Democratic issue. It is a Mississippi issue. And I think that that is a place in which, you know, I've had meetings with a lot of our leadership and those in leadership in our state to try to talk about this issue. And I think once that they can see, and once others see that this is not through a partisan lens, this is not somebody trying to make a play to run for another office, and once you kind of get rid of that silliness, you know, we really get something done. And I think that bill's going to pass. I think that you'll see an overwhelming support because we've been able to take out and pop the balloon of partisanship and really get down to, are we going to let these opportunities pass because of pettiness? One of the things I'm most regretful for, and this is, you know, a personal failing of mine, has been times in which I automatically, partisanship is tribal in nature. It's a bad thing, and it is tribal in nature. It just is. That I have immediately thought, person here, they work for this person, therefore I know good well if I walk in there, we're going to argue about it. See, that's a lot of times the beginning mindset. And I won't call the person out, but luckily I had a meeting last week with someone you would have not on paper thought that a Franklin Roosevelt New Deal Democrat would be able to have a conversation with. And I really felt like I met a long lost cousin when I left. And you know, I thought all the way home, how childish of me, even just that. We're infected by that. And so I think that if we can view people as people, if we can question your tactics and not your motives, that in and of itself induces a degree of civility that sometimes can pop that idea of partisanship. And it is not just confined within the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. We all have that sense of childishness in us at times that really and truly has to be checked, has to be popped. And this internet issue is a great issue. It's the same way as highways. You know, just simply isn't going to happen with one party. It's not going to happen with my party's support only. And I think recognizing that and not going into it as a, we're gonna show everybody just how awful you are because you won't pass this bill. Well, what did that get? You know, I could take that approach on this and never pass the bill, and rural Etowah County would still be without high-speed internet service. Yeah, I might get one blurb in the Clarion Ledger, but the problem is getting fixed.
So I'm following from that in some ways. I'm interested in hearing y'all reflect a little bit on what you do to cultivate habits of mind and character that incline you to be able to work with people, either professionally or personally, who you might disagree with on a lot of issues. Because I think what you just pointed to, Brandon, is this ability to maybe not expect the worst in somebody else. That sort of habit, it seems like, is useful. It seems like whenever we encounter extreme partisanship, some of it happens when we were talking about particular policy issues, but a lot of it happens a couple of stages before that, right? We have certain habits of mind and practices of our character and so forth that either lend themselves to talking with people who are different from us or incline us away from working with people who are different from us. So I'm wondering about, on a very personal, kind of fundamental level, what the kinds of practices or habits that you all think have benefited you in your own work, or that you might recommend to others so that they can work together across difference. Does that seem like a fair question?
You know, one of the things that, and I too want to kind of reiterate what Commissioner Presley here said. I've been in office since 2011, early 2011, the product of a special election to fulfill an existing term. So I guess I've been there since 2011, so 7+ years. But the commission that I walked into was a divided commission. Even under those circumstances, we were able to calm everything down and to have a conversation about the ultimate goal, and ultimately for the time that we had a split commission, a divided commission between both parties, 1 and 2 respectively, and we had a handful of votes along party lines. I can tell you that for the past almost 8 years, I've served on a commission with 3 Republicans, and we've never had more division related. Now we work it out, of course, but we've never had more votes that were split votes based on the central things, based on the difference in policy, not partisanship, but differences in policy. And I think that's a very positive thing. That shows you the engagement of the members of anybody. When partisanship is technically taken off the table and you have that kind of discussion. And it's been a very positive discussion. I personally will tell you, trying to answer your question, that I've learned a lot from those disagreements. You learn far more from the disagreements and the battles and discussions. Battles is too strong of a term. But the discussion, I've learned a lot from my counterparts in the central and the southern district based on those kinds of disagreements on policy and working your way through that than I ever did before, because the door was shut, as I think you're alluding to. Unfortunately, we're all human, and those things certainly do happen, and I'm certain that I probably have been guilty as well. But you learn far more from those kinds of discussions when the partisanship and the labels are removed from the situation. One of the things that to think about a healthy habit is I try to think about the transportation policy that we look at often and the different issues that face us, whether it's budget. And I really, this is very practical, but it's also very specific, is I usually remove names and labels and things that identify characteristics of the identity that deal with personality of issues from the subject altogether. Whether we're talking about appeal situations related to law enforcement issues, or if I'm dealing and working with those kinds of issues, I actually try to remove on the front end, before I know, the personality that's associated with that kind of a decision. And I think it gives you a certain level of clarity that you can't get otherwise. You have to admit and understand that we're all human, we're flawed individuals. Everyone in this room is a flawed individual in some way. And we don't want our biases to overall affect the general policy that we're responsible for. And you've also got to make sure that whatever that policy is and those decisions are, you have the ability to communicate it to the people who put you in the position there in the first place. And that's often very, just as difficult as making the right decision, being able to communicate it properly.
Yeah, I agree with every bit of that. I mean, one of the things, and confession is good for the soul. And I have been challenged about partisanship before, and I'm not proud of it. And I think to a degree, as I said, I think it is at times, it's an easy route to take. It is just so easy to say, I'm on this team, you're on that team, I'm good, you're bad. I had worked in that situation. I was the one Democrat and 2 Republicans. I understood I wasn't going to be chairman of the commission, right? We got 2 Democrats, 1 Republican. I ain't gonna have them. I didn't die in the ditch over that. When it flipped, the Democrats became in control of the commission. It's just the way those things happen. But it's not run around and rub your face in, and it's not I'm going to deny you something. I'll give you a good example. We have the chairman of our commission appoints our representative to several boards that are national in nature but affect what you pay in your power bill. And I won't bore you with all of that, but it's usually a commissioner from each state that regulates a certain portion of the industry and pretty high level appointments. Well, I knew Commissioner Britton was not going to be chairman of the commission, but we weren't a smart aleck about it. But I reached out and said, hey, would you like to serve in one of these appointments? I don't care to do this. Why don't you take it? Would you be interested in it? That's good for the state of Mississippi. I could have hogged them all for myself, right? But for what? I have operated in the minority party where you're left out of the decisions, where partisanship ran amok. One of the things that led me to write for an Attorney General's opinion that opened us up to the Open Meetings Act, we're supposed to have been doing it all these years and it hadn't been happening, was because, one of my consumer protection policies was voted on before I knew it and passed before I knew it. So I've been in that position, and I have been determined, and I think Commissioner Brown has too, that just because the Democrats are controlling the Public Service Commission, that's not first in our parade. First in our parade is, are we doing the job we're elected to do? Are we doing that job in an A+ type of manner? Are we looking for ways to help the public? And if it happens to fall out D and R, hey, that's life, but we don't start from there. And I don't start from a preconceived notion that Commissioner Britton from the Southern District is just going to be wrong on this issue simply because Commissioner Britton is a Republican and I'm a Democrat. I'll give you a really good example of this. This commission has faced the largest expenditure by a public utility in the history of the state of Mississippi, one of the largest expenditures ever in the state of Mississippi, and it became a royal mess. Now, I'm talking about the Kemper County coal power plant. The project's supposed to have been $2 billion, ended up at almost $8 billion. The company's ability to stay afloat, not go into bankruptcy, with consequences of that decision would have ran rampant for economic development in our state, investors, the Gulf Coast, so much is at stake. We saw that case on a 3-0, bipartisan. Everybody got in the room under exemption of the Open Meetings Act, and we're able to work out the issues. And we passed an order that wasn't challenged in court that put the issue behind us and removed an $8 billion cloud from the state of Mississippi. Now, I'm not putting laurels on our heads, but we didn't walk into that saying, here's how we're going to do it. You know how we did walk into that? Commissioner Britton, you represent the 90% of those people. How do you feel? He's a Republican. Commissioner Brown and I are Democrats. But he's elected directly from that constituency. So, we didn't want to jump ahead of him. We had input, but his input was very, very important. And it wasn't one of these, we'll show you and you'll just have to take it type of things. Personally, I'm like the Apostle Paul. I'm the chiefest of sinners at times. And I think that, daily, in this political environment that we live in, daily, we all should take inventory. It's our responsibility as a public official to take inventory of that cheapness and of that silliness and of that really, cheap mentality of partisanship. It's going to be there. There are times it's going to be there. It is a natural tension within American politics, but it should not be a heartbeat of American politics. And showboating is really what a lot of times it is.
So it seems like it's a natural human challenge to hold in balance, on the one hand, our convictions and values, and on the other hand, to have a measure of humility about those convictions and values. And it seems like that natural human instinct is only magnified for elected officials, that you have to fight for what you believe in, but you also have to compromise and work with others and show a measure of humility. I'm wondering if you all would be willing to reflect a little bit on the limits of bipartisanship, or how you know when to draw a line and to stand firm by the things that are sort of non-negotiable. Because, of course, critics of bipartisanship might say something like, well, that's just wishy-washiness. At the end of the day, it's important for you to fight for what you believe in. I'm sure you all do have non-negotiables in your personal and professional lives. Is it always obvious to you on the front end what those non-negotiables are, or does that emerge through the political deliberative processes? How do you know when to draw the line and to stop compromising?
Well, I think you're right. I think we are political animals. We are in a government that is divided by political parties. So, there's a natural, you can't put on a helmet and put on a suit tonight and go to a green field with lights and not say you're a football player, right? I mean, that's what you are. But, yeah, I think there are non-negotiables. Sometimes that is with the opposite party. Sometimes that's with your own party. When we voted on the Kemper County Power Plant, the day in which I voted no, I was the only commissioner that voted against it. Consistently did vote for it. I got a letter from Haley Barber, the Republican governor of the state, saying why I should change my vote. 5 seconds later, I get an email from Stephen Chu, the Secretary of Energy, on behalf of President Obama, saying I should change my vote. Sometimes there is that natural, I'm just not going to move on this type of thing. And Mike may disagree with me on this, and I may sound ignorant. A lot of it is, a lot of times, your gut common sense to right and wrong. Your gut common sense to life. In this case, the idea we would, if I voted yes to that, I would agree that there will never be a hiccup, there'll never be a problem, there'll never be a cost overrun in a $2 billion project. Well, anybody with walking around sense knows that's not right. And I just knew in my heart I wasn't going to vote that way. I think it's the face in the mirror test in the morning. Can you look yourself in the face and know that what you voted for and the way you acted? Let me tell you something, I ain't always been able to look in the mirror and smile at myself, and I'm ashamed of that. Because I've been petty and I've been partisan at times, and it's not the way to be. But can you face yourself? Secondly, can you explain it to the person in the Piggly Wiggly parking lot? Can you stop off in Ackerman, Mississippi, and explain why you voted for what you voted for? Haley Barber, you say be for what you for. The honest courage of your convictions. And if you can do that, and if you can be at peace with yourself, and if you know that, my non-negotiables may sometimes be with the Democratic Party, may sometimes be in a partisan vote. I don't start off there, though, Kenneth. I don't start off saying, I know I'm going to be against this because this is a Republican. They're elected. They have a right to affect the process. I don't have a right to be a jerk about that in the beginning. If you want to argue later on merits, that's one thing. But you don't have the right, and you should not just go into it, with your pistols.
I would say that the several things. The communication aspect of this is, I can't overstate how what I've learned about it's making the right decision, and then a very close second is being able to communicate why that is, how it is, why it's good for the people who have put you in your position to represent them on this particular issue. It is not an easy issue because we live in a world where, I don't know who to attribute this quote to, but it's very accurate. People don't seek information, they seek affirmation. They don't seek information, they seek affirmation. They are looking for people that look like them, sound like them, and have the same views as them. And that's where they go. And the world is just not that simple. You know, it's just not that simple. What whether we're talking about, engineering, for example, which is the area that I deal with on I guess more than anything on a daily basis. We outline our budget for the year, in the starting right now, actually, a continuous budget cycle, but that's a fairly simple process. We know we have limited amount of dollars and we have unlimited needs, so how do you prioritize that? But that's a process that's evolved over time, and we know how to handle that, and it's mechanical. But being able to field those phone calls from your constituency, they don't care that I'm interested in the policy and the budget side. They want to know. A colleague used to say that the highest road in the land was in the Andes Mountains and the lowest in the Sierra Nevada, but the most important road is in front of my house. And that's very, very true. And it applies to a lot of different governmental services. People don't seek information, they seek affirmation. And you have to be that medium and that conduit to be able to make the right decisions that are good for the greatest constituency, regardless of creed, color, socioeconomic status, all those different factors. You've got to be able to make the decisions that you think advance the folks in the district and the region and the state that have put you in place to make those decisions. I don't want, and I don't think more of my position than I should. I try to be very humble about it. I'm not the governor. I'm a transportation commissioner. But if that's all I ever do, I don't want my legacy to be some outrageous quote in the Clarion Ledger after yesterday. I want my legacy to be, they did the good work. And that doesn't get, we live in a time where that doesn't get the headline. Doing the good work and the solid work and the policy endurance that comes with that, those unfortunately are not the times we live in. So you got to find, yes, there are things that you don't compromise on. And we sat here talking, if this discussion were about policy, we could immediately find 2 or 3, 4 things, I'm sure, or 2 or 3, 4,000 things that the parties disagree on. But this is about the tone of the country, the conversation of the country, how we problem solve. It's unfortunate in this world where my children, I have 4 children, and think about what it means in this country for my 10-year-old not to be able to watch the news to discuss American politics. That's a problem. That's a significant issue on both sides of the aisle. Both sides of the aisle are guilty of this kind of rhetoric that have brought us to this place, and of course a million other factors, starting with social media and all the different things that I doubt we can solve today. But that's the tone of it, and you have to be able to make the right decision that will reflect on what you are interested in long term, what you want your legacy, so to speak, to be, whether it's an alderman for a city that is not able to pay an alderman, or whether it's the governor or the president. You have to be able to make those decisions. You have to be able to communicate it, the when, the where, the why, and hopefully people understand.
So I know we don't have time for a comprehensive analysis, but I want to follow up on what you said a moment ago, because it was something that was weighing on me as well. It seems to me that we are in a more partisan moment in our nation's history than we have been in my lifetime. I remember around the time of the Clinton impeachment, that was a period of what appeared to be pretty extreme partisanship. Looking back on it, I don't think it was as bad as what we're seeing now, but maybe you don't disagree. So it's a 2-part question. First off, do you also think that we are living in a more partisan era than we have in any point in your own lifetime? And if that is the case, why? So you mentioned social media as one thing, Mike. But what's going on? Right? Why are we moving in this direction? And what is going to reverse that, if anything?
There's lots of material here, but I would say we are seeing across our country we're seeing a distrust, and some of it is rightfully earned. I'm going to tell you, a distrust in some of the traditional institutions that we've held dear, and that have always been, in governmental terms, have always been somewhat sacred. And it's everything from a general example of law enforcement to big state agencies and economic development investments and how the government spends its money. We're seeing a significant distrust of a lot of traditionally honored governmental institutions that are out there. And again, some of it that is earned. But with that, it coincides with our ability to, and social media certainly is a major factor of this. I do think, as I mentioned before, that affirmation has become more important than information. And we see that continually. And as political voices and political leadership has to deal with that on a daily basis. And you don't have the ability, it is physically impossible to combat that. What you have to do is have a proactive communication plan that puts your directive in place and builds that narrative so that you can sustain those kinds of hits when they take place. We see it on a daily basis, and especially when you're dealing with emotional issues like public safety, significant local economic issues like broadband access. I would guess. Those are things that are directly measurable to the quality of life for a rural family living in rural parts of our state, and so they are emotional, and that feeds this kind of rhetoric that we see today. There's no question that we live in a much more partisan world today than we did, say, a decade ago.
That's a number one. Absolutely, we live in a more partisan era than we have in the past. I think that some of it comes down to the idea of almost, and I'm not just solely putting this on the current administration, I think from a nature of politics, a nature, not specific, is a reality television type view of the work and the players, if you will, the participants in government. That every Democrat is a extreme liberal Democrat, every Republican is an extreme conservative Republican, and there just ain't no in between. And that's just not true. That is just simply not true. I think in many cases both political parties are at fault for that. It's been, how can we short term, have a bumper sticker, have something smart to say, have some little cute quip, and eviscerate the other side. And who cares about the collateral damage because we were the cute, and this is on both sides. I'm not pointing at just Republicans. And who can be cute in that news cycle, and who can get the most retweets, and who can get the most likes on Facebook. And that is a sad commentary about where we are. But in my heart and mind, I think that is a lot of it. It is affirmation, not information. It's not whose team you're on, it's whose side you're on. It ain't a team thing. And I think that we saw it. It's been building up for a long time in this country. And when you say that you can't be a Christian if you're a Democrat, is offensive. If you can't say that you can't be compassionate if you're a Republican, that is just that in and of its nature has been a part of it. But our political leadership, not all political leadership, not every politician, this is about part, have in many times called us to that lowest common denominator. All because that's what moves a poll. That's what energizes a base. That's what assures come November. And I thought about this so many times, that verse in the Bible. Is it better to gain the world and lose your own soul? Really, is it better to win an election and lose? And I don't care if that election is a Democrat election or Republican. Is it better to gain it? Is it better to gain the world and lose everything you're about, lose everything your country's about? But guess what? The AP declared your party the winner election night. Is it really worth that? Maybe I'm crazy, and some would say I am. But when I've been gone, I don't want to have burned down the house because we had a leaky faucet. And I think that, these are these are country analogies, by the way, if you ain't picked up on that yet. But seriously, I mean, what is it worth? What is it worth? We lose credibility as parties because, you know, I don't care what, take an issue, set the last 2 days aside for a minute. Okay, very emotional and you know, let's set that aside. Let's just go to any issue out there. Is it really so important that you lose who you are and what you're about? And how can you say one thing in this set of circumstances, and when the circumstances completely flip, hats are changed, what you said in the circumstance before is not what you said in the circumstance after. And and this is sad to say, but just almost every issue you look at today, one can rewind whatever the Democrats are saying on a national level many times was right the opposite of what they said in a different situation. And what Republicans are saying is right the opposite of what they said in a different situation. And why on earth would you think that a common American would look at that and say, I'm throwing my hands up. I'm part of the, I'm not, but they would say, I'm part of the 80%, 75%, I ain't even showing up to vote. Why are they showing up to vote? Because you have proven to us, political leaders, that you're about whatever side is, whatever game is that day. That's really it. Who trusts, if I told you today that I was for universal broadband service because it's popular today and I'm in the majority at the Public Service Commission, and next year the Republicans take over and I say, well, that's a bad idea, would you believe me? No. And in my mind, that is really, people are not stupid. They can smell a fake 10 miles away. And you know what the bad thing is? They view us all as fakes. That's really it. At the end of the day, they just view us all as fakes. And so our job is to say, you know what? Things do matter. I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to vote wrong. I am going to make a mistake. I ain't perfect. There wasn't one person that was. And I'm not perfect. But here's the deal. I'm going to do the best I can. And I'm not going to start off saying that Mike Tagert's wrong simply because he runs as a Republican. And I think our people, particularly young people, say, you know what, this is a bunch of junk. These guys say one thing, or girls, they say one thing this minute, they say something else in the second, and it all depends on whose issue is what. You only have to just Google statements by people of each party in a different scenario, and they just simply, it's like they took the script, you know, from the other side. And for me, just as an American citizen, it ticks me off. Why are you preaching to me when you don't even obey what you say? And that doesn't matter about party. I'm going to shut up before they cut the mic off.
I wanted to add to that, I couldn't agree more. What we see, of course, is that the extremes on both the far right and far left are dictating the politics of our country. And it's not a popular position to be a reasonable, moderate, middle of the road, someone who uses the word compromise on occasion. When did the word compromise become such a bad word? And it goes back to that I mentioned earlier about the distrust in some traditional institutions in our country. It's connected, it's significantly connected to that. But you know that it's going to take a true. And I don't know how we get there, to be honest with you. I'm optimistic, but I'm also trying to be realistic. You see that the extremes on both ends are guiding the ship. And politicians, by their very nature, have an opportunistic streak. They take advantage of the times, and that's what we see particularly on the national level, taking advantage of the rhetoric and the national conversation and twisting it often to their advantage. You know, this is also why you will talk to any state consultant, you talk to any national consultant, and those far right and far left, this is exactly why negative ads are so effective in a campaign. Negative ads work. Do I like that? No. But they are effective, and they do work. And when you're trying to change that conversation, I do not like it, but they are very effective for this reason, because the motivated voters that Brandon alluded to, and he's exactly right, are on the far extreme ends of both ends of the spectrum. They are going to vote, and that's primarily where you see a lot of the battles, particularly in some of the states.
All right, this has been great, but I do want to give our audience a chance to join into the conversation. So it's y'all's turn. What questions have y'all come up with? And we've got about 15 minutes or so for audience Q&A. Who's first? All right, towards the back there.
Do you think given this climate that it might be right for a third party and the new party to truly come out and sort of take away from all the craziness right now? Is there an opportunity there?
That's such a simple question. I'm going to let my friend Brandon.
I'm gonna hand it back. We're being politicians right now, right? You know, I don't know. I just don't know. I will say that. My fear is that in many cases that is just a stalking horse for more of the same. You know, I think we've seen. I think we've seen the frustration of the American people, and I think that I think you're going to see some of that. I think we've seen it in the past, but the two-party structure is pretty darn strong, and I think that there is a mentality of, you know, this is just the way it is. I think you hear a lot of people say, you know, I'd love to have a third opportunity, but because it's not immediate in nature, and because it's not organized, and because it's not there, it's easy to say without having to commit yourself to it. And so, you know, I think that everyone would say, yeah, this is a great time for we've got the biggest argument. Practically, is that going to happen? I don't think so.
We see it, you know, from time to time where a third party has made a significant impact on an election. Even in Mississippi, we've seen that over the last 2 or 3 decades. We've seen examples of that. But I do agree the foundation of the two-party system and how it's so acutely embedded into even the policy that comes out of the state legislature, where policy decisions, where the speaker makes appointments on this board, and the lieutenant governor and the leadership of the various chambers even are making political decisions that are, you know, that's how embedded it truly is. My solution or my comment to that is that, again, we need a return to the moderate middle. We need a return to the moderate middle who's making decisions that are best for our state, not best for their party.
And as a political science professor, I'll briefly weigh in. I don't think that it's going to happen. It's not going to happen because, in part, in addition to what our panelists have said, our voting system, our electoral system is not designed to facilitate it. We have a first past the post system where it just doesn't really work. If we were designing something from scratch and had a proportional representation sort of model, then yeah, you're going to have proliferation of multiple parties. But with our electoral system, you're not going to have a viable third party ever, really. I don't see that happening. Next question. All right, well, I've got a question. I've got limitless question. So we've got a number of college students here. I'm wondering if you all have any particular advice or guidance or reflections on what people from 18 to 22 can or should be doing to prepare for life after college. What are the kinds of things that we should be maybe teaching in the classrooms, or the extracurricular sorts of habits that people should be taking part in, to prepare them for this partisan, divided world that we live in?
You know, what I would say is, we touched on it here today, regardless of your upbringing and what you bring to Millsaps as a student and your foundation, every bit of that, and I think that's part of the mission of the college itself, is to question that and make you evolve academically and intellectually as to how you got there. Because what you're going to find no matter how far, if you consider yourself extremely liberal today or extremely conservative, what you're going to find is there are exceptions to that. You're not going to believe everything that the Democratic Party platform has written in their actual constitution and the platform of the party. You're not going to believe the same for the Republican Party. You know, distinguish yourself by being independent, an independent thinker, by being, allowing yourself to have that conversation and form your own views, regardless of your upbringing, regardless of your socioeconomic upbringing, what your parents taught you. It's your opportunity, it's your responsibility, and our country will be better for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is read something from somebody you don't necessarily think you're going to agree with. Put them in your Twitter feed and make yourself take time to read. There's two sides to every coin. People are just people. They have opinions. You can be right. They really may have some argument. I was telling Kenneth earlier on the way up here, all we've seen the last day or so. One of the key things to me is to ask yourself, if you were in the other person's shoes, okay? If you're in the other person's shoes and you were sitting where they're sitting, regardless of what side you're on, would you feel as if at the end of the day you had been heard, treated fair, listened to, heard your side, the feelings involved, and that there is at least a fair shake? 99% of the conflict that I see in government is when things are taken in a process that nobody feels they've had a chance to have their say. I got elected mayor when I was 23 years old, and I would have people come into my office, and they'd be mad about this, mad about that. And I really learned that if I would just listen, and really listen, not just, thinking about what's for lunch, hurry up, get done, get out of here. Really listen. And they saw that 90% of the time, and they got it out, they were okay. They felt heard. Everybody wants to feel like that their voice matters and what they say matters. Our political process today just simply chokes all that down. It just chokes all that down. But why? Because it's about the sign, it's about the soundbite, it's about a reality TV show culture, and it's about who can say the cutest thing to get on MSNBC or the cutest thing to get on Fox. Sometimes, what is the most outrageous thing I can say to grab attention? And, filter that. Think for yourself. Don't let somebody put you in a box. Take time to look at something from, Atticus Finch said it to Scout best. Put yourself in the other person's shoes and walk around in them a little bit. And you have to do, as a Democrat, you've got to do that with the Republicans. They got a constituency to serve, they have a primary to run in, they have a base. And then you can kind of say, okay, wait a minute, this isn't personal. This is not from a bad motive. Maybe I don't agree with the tactics. Same thing for the Democrats. What is so easy, and I think this is the one thing that you have to guard against, and I have to guard against, and everybody else is the pure tribal, I keep saying that, but the pure tribal instinct in partisanship. It is the basis of racism. And so, it is just, it's there. You won't say, this is me, that's you, this is the way it is. And as much as you fight that instinct in your personal life, in every other degree, you've got to do it in your politics too. You just have to be proactively guarded against it. I don't care if you are the most ardent, self-declared liberal or the most ardent, self-declared Republican, conservative. You got to say, wait a minute. Every day question what it is you think. We are in a political cycle today that is phone it in politics. You don't have to think. Somebody tells you how to vote. You just do what you're told. My colleagues say this, they got to be right because they're my colleague. And every one of us have seen instances on a national level where you see a Republican and a Democrat really sit down and everybody feels good about it. Everybody says, that's really, it's like mom and apple pie and baseball. That's how it ought to be.
So that's how everybody's feeling right now.
Well, I don't know about that. But that's really how it ought to be. This is how our government is supposed to work. Everybody has that feeling except folks who don't want to even consider the other side. And I think that that's the challenge, is how do you break that within yourself?
Great. All right, got time for maybe one more question. Cheryl at the top.
This is not really a question, it's more of an observation. You mentioned that you didn't know the Republican and Democrat, what it said about your constituency and the voting. And I would posit that it really probably says more about you two as individuals than your constituency puts you into office.
Okay.
With the distrust of government, I don't know if that's a compliment or
No,
an insult.
I mean, it's sensitive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any final questions from our audience? Yes.
This isn't about bipartisanship, but it's for Commissioner Tagert. I was wondering if, as Transportation Commissioner, you had anything to do with transit. And I work in places like Yawamba County and Whitby County, and I realize it's harder in rural counties. But Oxford has a wonderful, thriving transit system that's getting better. Tupelo is just getting a transit system. We're very struggling here in Jackson. Does the Transportation Commission have anything to do with transit?
We do. Yes, we do. We administer all the federal transit programs. We provide state funding for the match for those programs. So we're heavily invested in public transit in Mississippi. It's and you know, that's to tie it into our discussion today. That is an example of an issue that nationally has been politicized, but it shouldn't be. Public transit has nothing to do with other than trying to take people to the hospital and to work. And to work, that's right. Which is what all the politicians tell you they want to do, is put everybody to work, right? So that's another good example of an issue that has fallen victim, I'm afraid, of politicization. But we do have those programs. I'll be glad to stick around and answer any questions you've got about it.
Great, well, we're about out of time. If y'all have any closing thoughts, I don't want you to feel like you're cut off though. Do y'all have any closing words of wisdom for our audience before we go? Great.
Thank you.
Let's give it up again for Mike and Brett. Thanks so much.